in. So, hi everyone. My name is Dr. Ankita, and today we'll be having this nice journal club on the ovarian stimulation, the ESHRE guidelines. And our first expert for today is Dr. Jyoti Malik, ma'am. She is the MS of JJ Institute of Medical Sciences, Bahadurgarh, and director of Roots IVF and Fertility Institute. And she's a chairperson of Haryana chapter of Indian Society of Assisted Reproduction. And she holds loads of important positions in various societies and has achievements like Women Transforming India Award 2024 and Women Achievers Award
Okay. Thank
2023.
you, Dr. Ankita. I think we'll move on. Thank you so much for the introduction.
I welcome you, Dr. Jyoti. Thank
Thank
you for joining us. And the next expert today is Dr. Divya. Dr. Sarika, if you could please.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we do the slideshow, please?
Yeah, ma'am. Done.
Yeah. Dr. Divya, thank you so much for joining in. Dr. Divya is a senior consultant and IVF specialist, Cloud9 Hospital, Gurugram. And she's done fellowship in National Board NB Delhi, ex-senior resident PGI Chandigarh and PGI MER beside Darapur. She has done a lot of workshops, conferences, best paper presentation award at FEM Conference, Mumbai. I welcome you, Dr. Divya. Thank you for joining in today.
Thank you for the kind introduction.
And our speaker for today is Dr. Sarika Gautam. She's a clinical fellow IVF in Cloud9 Hospital, and she also has a lot of awards and research and publications in her name. Dr. Sarika, you can start the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you
And
so
she'll
much.
be presenting on the ESHRE guidelines in ovarian stimulation.
Thank you so much.
Just a second, Dr. Sarika. Yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. And
Yeah.
I will just request Dr. Jyoti and Dr. Divya that at the end of the presentation, we can have all the questions, like the experts will be asking the speaker. Plus, we might be having some audience questions which we can address at the end.
Just a second. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Ankita, for the kind introduction. I'm Dr. Sarika, Clinical Fellow IVF at Cloud9 Hospital. Today, I'm going to present about the ovarian stimulation guidelines for IVF-XC update of ESHRE guidelines 2025. So, there are very limited evidence-based guidelines for ovarian stimulation in IVF-XC before the ESHRE took the step about making guidelines in 2019. There was only brief mention about the ESHRE guideline, about these guidelines in NICE, and only a narrative review was available in 2017 by the WHO. Now the ESHRE released the first full guidelines in 2019, and this is the update available now. So what is the ovarian stimulation? We all know about it. Is a pharmacological treatment to induce multiple follicles to for the indications of IUI and IVF. So, what is the guideline scope? In the guideline scope, to provide evidence-based options for ovarian stimulation in IVF-XC, and it focuses on the optimal ovarian response and live birth rate. They emphasizes on the safety of women, minimizing the OHSS, and patient compliance and comfort was the prime requirement. Individualization of stimulation protocol, and they have highlighted the knowledge gaps for the further research. So there was a very high heterogeneity was available regarding the definition. So there was no universal definition about the high response, low response. So GDG proposed the standardized definition for consistency in future practice and research for guideline purposes. So what is high ovarian response? In high ovarian response, exaggerated reaction to conventional ovarian stimulation, that is from 150 to 225 international unit, defined as more than 18 follicles of 11 on the trigger day, or the more than 18 more than 18 oocytes are retrieved. It is associated with increased risk of OHSS as well. And so what is the low ovarian response? Reduced reaction to standard ovarian stimulation, and it is defined as less than or equal to 3 follicles on the trigger day, or less than or equal to 3 oocytes are retrieved. So what are the outcomes? How they have decided the outcomes? The guideline focuses on outcomes of efficacy, safety, The patient-related outcomes and the critical outcomes of the guideline are efficacy in the term of cumulative live birth rate and the live birth rate per started cycle, and safety in terms of risk of moderate or the severe OHSS. Other outcomes which were measured were efficacy in terms of number of M2 received, number of total oocyte received, and safety was decided on the OHSS grade, cycle cancellation, bleeding, infection, and ovarian torsion. Long-term and the patient-related outcome were also measured. So recommendation, how they have given this IVF-XC update, there are 7 major groups of these guidelines. So it is divided into part A to part G. Part A is related to pre-stimulation evaluation. Part B is pre-treatment therapies. Part C is pituitary suppression and ovarian stimulation. Part D is related to the fertility preservation and oocyte donation and how to proceed in these cases. Part E is related to the monitoring. Part F is related to triggering ovulation and luteal support. Sorry, it's not working. Excuse me. Okay. So part G is prevention of OHSS. Total 122 recommendations were given. Recommendations are given on the basis of strength and quality of evidence. Strength is either strong, conditional, good practice point, or research only. And quality of evidences were given with the 2+ or the 1+. So there are total 122 recommendations, in which 45 are the new recommendation, 2000 which are given in 2025, while the 43 are similar to the COS guidelines of ESHRE 2019. 30 are updated and 4 are reworded from the 2019. So part A, now I'm going to take every part one by one. So part A is pre-stimulation ovulation. It is discussed about the ovarian response prediction and the pregnancy predictions. Markers taken for these are AFC, AMH, age, BMI, basal hormonal levels like FSH, inhibin B, estradiol, progesterone, and basal LH. So what the guidelines are saying about the pre-stimulation evaluation, ovarian response prediction, and pregnancy prediction. They are saying only AFC or AMH is recommended, and age, BMI, and other hormonal panel are not recommended for the prediction of ovarian response. This we can use for the patient counseling and whether to decide the investigation before the start of the cycle. And pregnancy prediction, they are saying that AFC, AMH level and these hormonal panels are not recommended for the prediction of pregnancy and live birth rate. And female age and BMI are the strong predictor for the live birth rate. This is updated in 2025. All these 4 guidelines are strong recommendations given by them. So in this guideline, they have given 19-20 PICO questions. So they are saying whether, so they have decided how to do this AFC and predicting the ovarian response. They have done a systematic review and meta-analysis and decided high response and low response. For both sensitivity and specificity was seen higher, and overall they said AFC is a strong predictor, but still heterogeneity exists in the available data. Similar results are seen for AMH as well. Various studies were analyzed and GDG found out that there is no role of doing basal FSH and other hormonal panel, while age and BMI are remaining the strong predictor of pregnancy outcome. In the part B, pre-treatment therapies, the PICO question was given, does hormone pre-treatment improve efficacy and safety of ovarian stimulation? And GDG discussed about these pre-treatment medicines like estrogen, progesterone, whether COC are better or not better, GnRH antagonist in a delayed start approach, and HCG. All these pre-treatments are prevalent in IVF practice. So what is the purpose of these pre-treatment therapy? To either to suppress or the reduce luteinizing hormone or FSH before gonadotropin stimulation, and goal of pre-treatment therapy by the various consultants to synchronize follicle development, prevent early dominant follicle or premature LH surge, reduced risk of cyst formation. It is also used for cycle scheduling, and it helps clinician, labs, and patients to plan cycle in advance. So what are the recommendations for the pre-treatment? For the for the pre-treatment with estrogen before ovarian stimulation, it's a strong recommendation in GnRH antagonist protocol. It is not recommended for improving the efficacy. Similarly, for the progesterone before ovarian stimulation, it is not recommended to improve efficacy. Estrogen or progesterone pre-treatment, it can be used only for the scheduling purposes and given the data on efficacy and safety. What about the COC? For the COC pre-treatment is also very prevalent, but they have not recommended in the GnRH antagonist protocol. According to them, when we are doing with the only FSH stimulation cycle, it has been showing a reduced efficacy in terms of M2 received and the live birth rate, and it is a strong recommendation. GnRH antagonist pre-treatment before ovarian stimulation is also not recommended. And HCG pre-treatment can only be used for the research purpose. It is entirely not recommended by them. And the part C is talking about the pituitary. Am I audible? Excuse me, am I
Yeah,
audible?
you're audible.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, ma'am. Part C, pituitary suppression and ovarian stimulation. This is the major chunk of the guidelines because it is again divided into 6 subparts. So I am going, this part C is in 6 subpart. I am going to tell one by one in very brief. So they have discussed about the stimulation protocol, how to suppress the pituitary before starting the IVF cycles, types of gonadotropins and other ovarian stimulation drugs, adjustment of gonadotropins, adjunct therapies and its role in the IVF cycles, and non-conventional start of ovarian stimulation. So, according to the predicted response stratification, which stimulation protocol should be used or which is most sufficient? For this guideline, development group, GDG group, has taken the population into high responders, normal responders, and the low responders. Guideline only discussed about the delayed start stimulation protocol for the above population and gave recommendation. And the rationale behind this to delay the start of ovarian stimulation and for the patient safety, prevention of OHSS. That's why they mainly discuss the delayed start protocol. So these are the recommendation by them for the high responders. High responders, normal responders, low responders. For the high responder, delayed start stimulation is not recommended for the decreased for the OHSS to decrease the OHSS risk, and no evidence for NC and MNC, and reduced gonadotropin dose is also probably recommended. In this high responder, we can reduce the dose of this gonadotropins. And for the high responders, they have recommended, and it is the updated one guidelines, that antagonist protocol should mainly be used. And if agonist is used, then we should keep the dose of gonadotropin on a lower side. And for the normal responder, this delayed start ovarian stimulation is not recommended. They are saying you can start from any day, but you should not delay for the purpose of increasing the M2 yield or decreasing the OHSS risk. Conventional dose is preferred. No benefit of increasing or decreasing the dose in normal responder. It is the updated one. And for the low responders, they have not recommended delayed start, modified natural cycles, no use of high gonadotropin doses, uh, and they have continued the 2019 update of greater than 300 international unit gonadotropin dose is not recommended. They didn't found too much of evidences whether high doses versus 300 is better. So they have done the dose comparison for these ovarian gonadotropins, 200 versus 100, 225 versus 200, 300 versus 150, and 300 versus 225. In the pregnancy, they have found no changes, and there is no severe OHSS increase the doses. So there is insufficient evidence to support or refute the use of delayed start ovarian stimulation for normal responders compared to conventional ovarian stimulation. And then they have done the dose comparison in the low responders, and they have done the comparison and searched the evidences for 300 up to 600, 450 doses. And in pregnancy, similar, they haven't found any change. And there is no increase or decrease in the OHSS risk. Although they have found that with the dose of 300 to 450 versus 150, there are more on increase of M2s in higher doses. So what recommendation? They said do not routinely exceed conventional doses 150 to 225 for predicted low responders, and doses greater than 300 international unit are not recommended, unlikely to improve outcomes. Higher doses may increase the oocyte number, but when they have followed the data and they found that there is no improvement in live birth rate, although we can get the more oocytes with the higher doses so that we can make more embryos. Evidence limited by the small sample size and low quality data. And what about the pituitary? This is a subpart 2 of that part C, pituitary suppression regime. So which pituitary suppression protocol is preferable? They have discussed about the 3 type of suppression regimes. One is the GnRH agonist suppression, GnRH antagonist suppression, or with the progesterone. And following recommendations are given for the pituitary suppression. They are saying if GnRH agonists are used, long GnRH protocol should be is recommended over the short or ultra short. And when it is a strong recommendation. Besides, the GnRH antagonist protocol is universally recommended over the GnRH agonist protocol. Very strong recommendation. They have given 3+ for it, and there is comparable efficacy and higher safety in the general IVF ICSI population for high, low, and normal responders. Flexible and fixed GnRH protocols are probably equally recommended. And the conditional evidences for freeze all, if you're using a freeze all strategy for the patient, use of excuse me, use of progestin for pituitary suppression is equally recommended to GnRH analogs. Whether you are using GnRH agonist versus antagonist, progestin is equally good to do the pituitary suppression. So they have done so evidence, what their evidence is said about this GnRH agonist protocol. Ultimately, they have compared all this long versus short, long versus ultra short, short versus ultra short, long luteal versus follicles start. On compiling, when I was compiling the data, I have also seen that there is no difference when in the term of live birth rate and pregnancy, but most of these studies are available for the long protocol only. So they have ultimately recommended the long protocol over the short protocols. GnRH antagonist suppression, it overcomes many undesirable side effects of GnRH agonist protocol. Early studies showed that slightly lower pregnancy rate, but now the recent meta-analysis which are discussed in the GDG, they are showing the similar live birth rate. So it is better to use GnRH antagonist over GnRH analogs. Flexible versus fixed are equally recommended. There is high study heterogeneity, but live birth and ongoing pregnancy rates are equally similar for both type of protocols. And what about progestin pituitary suppression? So they have done the comparison of progesterone versus GnRH antagonist, progesterone freeze all versus GnRH antagonist fresh, progesterone versus GnRH agonist. So finally, they said if freeze all is planned, the use of progesterone for pituitary suppression is probably equally recommended to GnRH analogs because there is no difference in live birth, pregnancy, M2, oocyte, and OHSS. And the doses, they have discussed about the doses, different doses, 4 mg versus 10 mg. We can use for 10 mg as also. So in the subpart 3 of this types of which type of gonadotropin and other ovarian stimulation drugs should be used, they are mainly they mainly discussed about the recombinant FSH, HMG, and they have given the data accordingly. So these are the number of guidelines from 26 to 31 are the guidelines related to the recombinant FSH, and of these 3 are the strong, and while 3 are conditional depending on the individualization of the patients. So use of recombinant FSH and human menopausal gonadotropin for ovarian stimulation is equally recommended. The use of RFSH and purified FSH is also equally recommended. Use of RFSH and highly purified FSH in GnRH agonist protocol is equally recommended. And the conditional ones are the combination of RFSH with RLH and RFSH alone is equally recommended. So all these are almost recommended. And the combination use of recombinant FSH with human menopausal gonadotropin either from the start or mid phase of ovarian stimulation, they are not recommending it over the use of either FSH or HMG alone in normal and low responders. It is a conditional, and they have finally suggested individualization should be done. So for the gonadotropin, these four highlighted in the blue, they have compared, and all these combinations were examined, and they found there is no difference in efficacy and safety when they have searched about RFSH versus HMG, RFSH versus purified urinary FSH, recombinant versus recombinant FSH plus LH. The combined of, I have already told, it is not recommended. And long-acting gonadotropins, although they are not available in India, they have given a recommendation for the long-acting gonadotropin in for the patient's safety, for the patient's scheduling of their work and life balance. They said the use of long-acting long-acting recombinant FSH is equally recommended in GnRH antagonist cycles for normal responders, and it is a strong recommendation. Folitropin delta, alpha, beta, all are equally recommended for ovarian stimulation. There is a large and small RCT was available in the guidelines. In low responders, they found no difference in pregnancy, COCs received, or the OHs, and no controlled studies in high responders are available for there. And GnRH antagonist protocol is recommended with long-acting RFSH. So this can be taken up if it is available in India. So we can do this GnRH antagonist protocol with long-acting RFSH. It is effective for continuous 7 days. So gonadotropin cycles, the use of highly purified FSH and human menopausal gonadotropin in GnRH agonist protocol is equally recommended. And the use of recombinant LH with FSH for ovarian stimulation is probably not recommended over HMG in GnRH agonist protocol. There is a small RCT with only 122 patients, and they found the pregnancy rates similar, and OHSS related cancellation are higher with RFSH and LH. That's why they are not recommending to combine this recombinant LH plus recombinant FSH over HMG. So adding low dose, what is the use? They are saying adding low dose of HCG to the FSH stimulation is probably not recommended. It is given in 2025, but it is still conditional. So we can adjust according to the patient profile. So there is no proven benefit of HCG supplementation in general population, low responder as well as in a PCOS patients. So what about the combination, whether we should use the combination of oral drugs as well as the injections, gonadotropins and letrozole combination, gonadotropin and clomiphene citrate. So what they are saying, all these guidelines are conditional, but the evidence is 1+. So a stimulation scheme starting with gonadotropins followed by letrozole. It should not be like that. We initially starting with the FSH and then we are going with the letrozole. It is not recommended over gonadotropins alone, especially in the low responders. Addition of letrozole to gonadotropin in stimulation protocols for predicted high responders is also not recommended. Basically, they are saying gonadotropin along with letrozole, we should not use it. Gonadotropin and clomiphene citrate combination, the addition of clomiphene citrate to gonadotropins in stimulation protocol, it is not recommended for high responders, normal responder, as well as for the low responders. So part 4, adjustment of gonadotropin, whether we should, when we have started the IVF cycle with certain dose, whether we should do the adjustment in between the cycle or at the end of the cycle. So they are saying adjustment, whether we have to increase the dose or decrease the dose. in the mid stimulation phase, it is probably not recommended, although it is conditional. They haven't defined whether which type of population we should do the adjustment. They haven't given the data about for the high responders versus low responders. There's I'm getting some voice. Please mute yourself, Suma. Given the lack of evidence of the value of dose adjustment during ovarian stimulation, it is important that gonadotropin starting dose is appropriate based on the patient characteristics and desired outcome. This is good practice point. Ideally, when we are starting the IVF cycle, after checking complete checklist of the patient's characteristics, her age, BMI, and the AFC and AMH, we should decide the dose initially, and we should stick with that dose. Although it is good practice point. If we are finding more follicle, ideally we can decrease or increase the dose according to that. Start dose should be based on ovarian reserve, that I have already told. And now the sub part, what is the role of adjuncts? Adjuncts, whether we should add the adjuncts or not. So guideline discussed about the following adjuncts: metformin, growth hormone, testosterone, DHEA, aspirin, sildenafil, and myoinositol. So routine use of adjuvant metformin is probably not recommended in women with PCOS, and use of adjuvant growth hormone before or during ovarian stimulation is not recommended for normal responders, low responders, or women with PCOS. They haven't found, and they have given it as a strong recommendation that we should not use the growth hormone in hope of that the follicle will increase along with that. And the use of testosterone before ovarian stimulation is also not recommended for the low responder. Use of DHEA is also not recommended for low responders. This has been taken from the 2019 and it is continued similarly. And what about use of DHEA before before and during just a second. Use of sildenafil before and during ovarian stimulation is not recommended for poor responders. Use of myoinositol, women with PCOS undergoing IVF, it is not recommended. Ultimately, I found that any type of adjuncts, they are saying we should not use them. Use of myoinositol is also not recommended. So this is the last part 6 of that ovarian stimulation. Non-conventional start, whether we should do the non-conventional start, yes or no. They are saying random start ovarian stimulation could be used when a fresh transfer is not intended and there is no possibility of natural conception. Luteal start ovarian stimulation could be used when a fresh transfer is not intended. Late luteal phase start of gonadotropins with fresh transfer is also not recommended. Dual stimulation can be considered for urgent fertility preservation cycles. Double stimulation can be used with the intention to accumulate more oocytes or more embryos when fresh transfer is not recommended. It is a strong recommendation given by them. So now what about a special population when we have to do the fertility preservation or the oocyte donation? They have dedicated a separate segment for these patients. And the PICO question was, what is the preferred stimulation protocol for fertility preservation in patients facing gonadotoxic treatment? They have searched the evidences and analyzed for them when to start a stimulation. Either it should be random, or it should be luteal phase, or the duo stimulation. What should be the pituitary suppression protocol for them? Which ovarian stimulation protocol is good? Which protocol to be used for final oocyte maturation protocol? So this is the combined slide which I made for this presentation purpose. They have searched about the random protocol, luteal and duo stimulation. So they found the similar yield. So and compared oocyte and embryos are available. So all these 3 protocols can be used for the fertility preservation as well as for the oocyte donation. And what about pituitary suppression? Whether we should do with the GnRH agonist versus antagonist? Similar oocytes are available. Similar oocyte yield is available overall. So recommendations are given for the antagonist cycles because they are better controlled. safe and effective, and we can start randomly. So antagonist protocol are recommended for the pituitary suppression. Progestin versus antagonist. They have found M2 yield is similar. OHS is seen in both, and mixed results are seen. So we can use them interchangeably, progestin versus antagonist, depending on the patient individualization. And so what should be the ovarian stimulation protocol? Whether we should do the letrozole co-administration, tamoxifen co-administration, there is no difference in oocyte yield versus conventional doses, and significantly decrease serum estradiol. So it is generally considered safe to add the letrozole in these group of patient. Although for the general population, they are saying letrozole co-administration is not that much equally required. But for this population, they are saying because we are decreasing the serum estradiol, so co-administration can be done. And what about the final oocyte maturation and the trigger? Which one we should use? GnRH agonist, depot, or the short-acting SCG trigger, or the double trigger? So for the GnRH agonist depot versus short, they are saying comparable oocyte yield and M2 rate versus HCG. HCG triggers similar oocytes. So these are the recommendation for the patients who are facing gonadotoxic treatment. For patient facing gonadotoxic treatment, ovarian stimulation for fertility preservation should be started irrespective of the menstrual cycle phase. It's a strong recommendation. And the conditional one is for ovarian stimulation in women seeking fertility preservation for medical reasons. The GnRH antagonist protocol is recommended, probably recommended, although in ovarian stimulation for fertility preservation in estrogen sensitive diseases, the concomitant use of anti-estrogen therapy such as letrozole or tamoxifen can be considered, and it is continued from the 2019 only. For final oocyte maturation, HCG is preferred. According to them, HCG is preferred unless the patient is at risk of early OHSS. So if the patient is at the risk of early OHSS, we should use the GnRH agonist trigger instead of HCG trigger. So what is the preferred stimulation protocol? For elective oocyte recommendation, almost similar results are seen for the elective. So they are saying we could start the stimulation at the any point of menstrual cycle. GnRH antagonist or progestin protocol, both are equally recommended. And for final oocyte maturation and the trigger, HCG can be preferred unless the patient is at risk of OHSS. And what about oocyte donation? In the oocyte donation population, they are saying conventional follicular start or recommendation is almost similar for all these three groups of patients. Conventional follicular start or random start is equally recommended. Random start, if we are using random start, we need to be sure that patient is not going to conceive naturally. The use of any type of contraception before or during ovarian stimulation is not contraindication in oocyte donors. For pituitary suppression in oocyte donors, the GnRH antagonist and progestin protocol for suppression is equally recommended. So the routine use of GnRH agonist trigger is recommended in them, and it's a strong recommendation given by them for pituitary suppression. And use of HCG trigger is not routinely recommended in oocyte donation cycle. In these patients, they are saying that we should use the GnRH agonist trigger instead of HCG. So we are going to do the monitoring. This is the part E of this guideline. So PICO question was when to start monitoring of follicular development. So there is very heterogeneity is there. There is no proper studies are available from which day we should start the assessing the follicle. There is very much heterogeneity, and standard practice point tool is baseline USG and then follow up from the day 8. And this practice is also varies from consultant to consultant and center to center. So the PICO question they have suggested and they have analyzed about whether the addition of hormonal assessment, estradiol, progesterone, LH to ultrasound monitoring, whether it is going to improve the efficacy in safety. So one by one, I'm telling you about these. There was a global survey which was done by Sex-Gudez et al. In 2023. They have conveyed that ultrasound is used by 98.9% IVF consultants, and hormone monitoring is being done 79.5% overall. Estradiol is also one of the most common hormone which is being assessed by the consultants for the monitoring of the cycle. 71% of them are using before trigger, and while 74% are using for OHSS production. And progesterone is also very popular. 67.7% people are using before trigger. 23.5% people said that they are always searching for this evidence for the monitoring, and 21.1% are selectively using. LH, for the LH, there are only 27.3% people are doing monitoring with the LH. 31.5% are using it for before trigger. So the recommendation. So what is the recommendation? The addition of estradiol measurement to ultrasound monitoring is probably not recommended, and this recommendation is continued from the 2019 only. There was a Cochrane meta-analysis by Kwan et al. But with a lower population, only 781 women were analyzed, and adding serum estradiol to ultrasound, it does not reduce the OHSS risk. So conclusion is that ultrasound alone is sufficient. Adding E2 offers no proven benefit. So what is the role of ultrasound with the progesterone measurement, ultrasound with the LH measurement, and other hormonal panels? So they have analyzed the evidences of ultrasound to estradiol, all these. There are no differences were found in OHSS, pregnancy, or oocyte in estradiol with E2, P4, and LH, while there is no published data is available for ultrasound with progesterone, ultrasound with LH. So this is opening the horizon for the further research in this area. They are asking that we should do some more refined research to make further new guidelines. Recommendation is given that addition of all these hormonal panel is not recommended. Does monitoring of endometrial thickness affect the efficacy and safety? Recommendations are saying we should not use the endometrial thickness for checking the efficacy and safety. Guideline, although group is suggesting if you're using a fresh transfer or you want to counsel the patient after that, then you should perform the single measurement of endometrium on the day of triggering or oocyte pickup day for the counseling. No studies compared monitoring endometrial thickness versus no monitoring. So what is the criteria for oocyte maturation in the while we are doing monitoring? So PICO question was, is the outcome of ovarian stimulation dependent on the criteria for final oocyte maturation? The association of follicle size as a triggering criteria with outcome has not been sufficiently studied, although everyone is using the follicle size criteria, but still the evidences are still lacking. Physicians may choose the follicle size upon the final oocyte maturation is triggered on a case-to-case basis. It's still conditional. There is no strong recommendations, and it is continued from the 2019. And now it's a good practice point to the decision on timing of triggering in relation to follicle size is multifactorial, and we should take account of growing follicle cohort, hormonal data, per use trigger, duration of stimulation, patient burden, and financial cost, all these to be considered, and experience of previous cycles. And then final maturation is triggered at the various sizes of leading follicles between 16 to 22 mm. So they have searched for the evidences when to do the final maturation. They have searched for the early versus late HCG, whether it is beneficial, triggering at leading follicle 18 mm versus 22 mm, whether it is beneficial, estradiol level, and estradiol to follicle ratio. When they have searched about the early versus late HCG, they haven't found any difference in live birth or ongoing pregnancy. Late HCG, although it is giving more oocyte retrieved. For the triggering at leading follicle, they are saying about 22 mm, higher ongoing pregnancies are seen and more oocytes are retrieved. Estradiol level and estradiol to follicle ratio, there are no studies are available about this comparison. So GDs is is not recommending the base timing of final oocyte maturation on the estradiol level alone. We need to go with this practice guideline, and we need to consider all these parameters to decide the final day for the triggering. The GDG does not recommend the base timing of final oocyte maturation on estradiol to follicle ratio alone. And for this hormonal assessment on the day of final oocyte maturation, whether we should do it or not. So PICO question was given is hormonal assessment on the day of final oocyte maturation as recommended, and they searched the data for the SCG triggered cycle, GnRH agonist triggered cycle. For both studies, suggesting levels of E2, P4, LH were examined, and GDG suggests about these following guidelines. They said it is probably recommended to measure serum progesterone levels on the day of final oocyte maturation when we are planning a fresh embryo transfer only. Then only we should do the serum progesterone. If serum progesterone levels are high, patient should be counseled about potentially lower ongoing pregnancy or live birth rate. The decision to defer embryo transfer should include other factors like number of oocyte, number of embryos, and the embryo qualities. It is a good practice point only. And it is not recommended to routinely measure serum E2 levels on the day of SCG trigger in ovarian stimulation cycle with an intent for fresh embryo transfer. This is given in 2025 and it is very strong. It is not recommended to measure serum LH level on the day of SCG trigger. They are talking about the SCG trigger in ovarian stimulation cycle aimed for a fresh embryo transfer. It is not recommended to measure serum estradiol, P4 or LH level on the day of GnRH agonist trigger if we are doing a freeze-all cycle. So the population of fertility, preservation, oocyte donors and all, it is not recommended that you should do LH, LHE2 and P4 levels. Criteria for cycle cancellation, how to be decided when we are doing monitoring. Sometimes we need to cancel the cycle. So what should be the criteria for cycle cancellation? So GDG took two criteria for cancellation. One is a low oocyte yield, another is a high oocyte yield with the risk of OHSS. So they have defined this when to call the low oocyte yield, that is 0 to 5 oocyte yield. Pregnancy possible even with 1 to 2 oocyte. Live birth 2 to 17% depending on age and AFC. Age is the strongest predictor. Individualized decision making required. So this is a practice point and counseling when you are doing a monitoring of cycle and you are not able to see 1-2 follicles, and then it should be discussed with the patient whether we go ahead or should we cancel the cycle. And what about high? If we are having more than 15 oocytes or more than 18 to 19 follicles, there is very increased risk of OHS, although 2 to 9% cases could be of severe OHSS. Live birth rate, although increases up to 15 oocytes, it plateaus between 15 to 20 and declines more than 20. So if you are finding more than 20 oocytes, whether cycle cancellation should be done or not, but although they suggested it should be considered if more than 30 follicles are there, because there are chances of OHSS and there is no extra benefit of getting the live birth rates or the cumulative live birth rates. So following recommendations are given for the cycle cancellation. A low response to ovarian stimulation alone is not a reason to cancel a cycle, because our population is doing the IVF cycles at very advanced age. So if we are getting only 2 or 3 follicles, we should discuss and decide whether we should cancel the cycle, yes or no. The physician should counsel the individual unexpected low responders regarding pregnancy prospects and decide individually whether to continue the cycle or to cancel the cycle. It's a good practice point only. In GnRH agonist cycle, with an ovarian response of greater than 19 follicles of 11 mm, there is an increased risk of OHSS and preventative measures are recommended, which should include primarily cancelling the final oocyte maturation trigger and ideally cancel the cycle if you are getting more than 19 follicles. In GnRH antagonist cycle, withholding GnRH agonist triggering may still be considered in women with extremely high ovarian responses. So this is a part F of the guideline. triggering ovulation and luteal support. So they searched on the what is the preferred drug for triggering of final oocyte maturation in terms of efficacy and safety. So they discussed about the HCG, triptorelin, and uh, they compared about it. The use of recombinant HCG and urinary HCG is equally recommended. Sorry, a reduced dose of 5,000 international unit versus 10,000 international dose is it may improve safety. It is not recommended to administer recombinant LH for triggering final oocyte maturation, and it is the strong recommendation given by them. Another strong recommendation is the use of GnRH agonist for final oocyte maturation is not recommended in the general IVF-ICSI population with fresh transfer, regardless of luteal phase support. If GnRH agonist trigger is used, GnRH agonist trigger with triptorelin is applied, doses should be ranged from 0.1 to 0.4. The addition of GnRH agonist to HCG as a dual trigger for final oocyte maturation is probably not recommended. There is too limited evidences to draw conclusion on the use of double trigger for final oocyte maturation. So they have done a comparison of urinary versus recombinant HCG. They found no significant differences when they are comparing urinary HCG versus recombinant. Urinary HCG 10,000 versus 5,000. Urinary HCG 10,000, 5,000 versus 2.5 thousand. There is no difference in the triggering in the ongoing pregnancy OHSS and oocyte rate. And then they have searched the evidences of GnRH agonist trigger versus HCG. So GnRH agonist versus HCG, there is no difference in live birth or clinical pregnancy. Although they recommended the use of GnRH agonist for final oocyte maturation is not recommended in the general IVF population with fresh transfer, regardless of luteal phase support, with or without LH activity, and they have updated it from the 2019. GnRH agonist trigger is associated with decreased OHSS rates. It is associated with low levels of endogenous LH secretion after triggering. Then they have discussed about the triptorelin 0.1 versus higher doses. There is no differences in total or mature oocytes when they compare the data of 0.2 versus 0.3 versus 0.4. And they have there is no the studies are available, so no recommendation on doses were given for the buserelin and leuprolide. No studies are available. So if the GnRH agonist trigger with triptorelin is applied, doses should be ranging from 0.1 to 4. What about the dual and double trigger? For the normal responders, they have discussed about the dual trigger versus HCG. Mostly similar results are available. Advanced age, whether we should do the dual trigger versus only GnRH, similar live birth rates. For the poor responders, dual trigger versus HCG, mixed results are seen. Normal responders with low oocyte maturation, higher cumulative live birth in one study was found that we should do the double trigger versus HCG. Poor responders, double trigger versus HCG or GnRH agonist. No significant differences in ongoing pregnancy or M2 oocytes. Limited evidences are available although for them. So recommendations, conditional recommendations both. The addition of GnRH agonist to HCG as a dual trigger for final oocyte maturation is probably not recommended for the predicted normal responders. And addition of GnRH agonist to HCG as a dual trigger is not recommended for low responders. So what about luteal phase support? Whether when we have done the retrieval, so what to be done for the luteal phase? So they have discussed about the progesterone doses, route, timing, and dydrogesterone, whether we should do the estradiol supplementation. HCG should be given, yes or no. GnRH agonist and repeated GnRH agonist, their role, and LS supplementation. All 6 points are discussed in the luteal phase support section. So these recommendations are given for progesterone. Progesterone is recommended for luteal phase support after the IVF-ICSI. and it can be given by any non-oral routes for natural progesterone as luteal phase support. The doses are only empirically given, good practice points. On the basis of good practice point, we can choose anyone. 50 milligram once daily for IM, 25 milligram once daily for subcutaneous, 90 milligram once daily for vaginal, 200 mg 3 times a day for micronized progesterone in oil capsule, 100 mg 3 times a day, 400 mg 2 times a day. Any type of any prescription can be used for the progesterone. And starting of progesterone for luteal phase support should be in the window between the evening of the day of oocyte retrieval and day 3 post oocyte retrieval. We should start progesterone within this window only. And progesterone support should be administered until at least the day of the pregnancy test. Evidences for progesterone supplementation. There's a Cochrane meta-analysis which included 5 RCTs with 642 patients. They are saying progestins are increasing the live birth rate. So we should do the progesterone supplementation in the luteal phase support if we are planning fresh transfer. What about dihydroges, estradiol, HCG, GnRH, LH? Only strong recommendation is given for the HCG. In HCG-triggered ovarian stimulation cycle, HCG as luteal phase support in standard doses 1500 IU, it is not recommended. We should not use it. A GnRH agonist bolus in addition to progesterone for luteal phase in HCG-triggered, not recommended. Repeated GnRH, not recommended. Addition of LH is only for research purpose. Although for the dihydrogesterone is recommended for luteal support because it is an oral progesterone, we can give it for the patient convenience. So part G, this is the last part of the guidelines, prevention of OHSS. Triggering final oocyte maturation with GnRH agonist significantly reduces the risk of early onset OHSS in patient at risk of OHSS. So these are the guidelines which are given for the prevention of OHSS. A GnRH agonist trigger is recommended for final oocyte maturation in women who are at risk of OHSS, combined with a freeze-all strategy to minimize the risk of severe OHSS. If a GnRH agonist protocol with HCG trigger is used in high responder, a freeze-all strategy should be taken. And the addition of HCG to GnRH agonist as a dual trigger for final oocyte maturation is probably not recommended for high responders. In patient at risk of OHSS, the use of GnRH agonist for final oocyte maturation is probably recommended when no fresh transfer is performed. Besides that, a GnRH agonist trigger for final oocyte maturation with or without freeze-all strategy is preferred over a coasting strategy in patient at risk of OHSS. Dopamine agonist, it is a strong recommendation that dopamine agonist should be recommended to decrease the risk of early OHSS, particularly in patient receiving HCG for final oocyte maturation. A freeze-all strategy is very safe. It should be recommended to minimize the risk of late onset OHSS. Prior to start of ovarian stimulation, a risk assessment for high response is advised with the purpose of applying personalized treatment choices on pituitary suppression protocol, FSH doses, final oocyte maturation trigger, and embryo transfer strategy. This is a good practice point. So everyone should revise their papers before starting the IVF cycles. If you are finding a patient who you're predicting high responder, we should decide the doses to avoid OHSS because it is a completely preventable disorder of the IVF. So we all should try to decrease the OHSS risk at the initiation of the IVF cycle. So PICO question, which GnRH agonist medication as a method of triggering will add to the prevention of the ovarian hyperstimulation? Also with regard to overall efficacy. So they have searched about the GnRH agonist versus HCG. They found the live birth and oocyte are similar. Yield is similar while there is a decrease, moderate or the severe OHSS risk with GnRH agonists trigger. GnRH agonist plus freeze-all versus fresh transfer live birth rate are similar. OHSS only seen in fresh transfer cycle. GnRH agonist versus non-10,000 hcg dual trigger. They have find live birth rate, oocyte, and risk of HSS similar. GnRH agonist with freeze-all versus HCG plus freeze-all, cumulative pregnancy and live birth rate are similar, and OHSS risk is minimized. So we should try to use GnRH agonist with freeze-all versus HCG plus freeze-all. So whether it is meaningful in the prevention of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, also with regard to efficacy. So they have done the comparison of freeze-all versus fresh transfer. In OHSS incidence, they have found there is a lower incidence of OHSS, while live birth rate is not changing. There is no difference. And evidences were made on the 4,700 women with the 6 to 8 hour CTs. So freeze-all approach is the only effective if the clinical has a reliable, high quality embryo freezing and storage system. So the condition in which we should predict high responders. So patient with PCOS syndrome, patient with an above average ovarian reserve status, patient exhibiting a high ovarian response as indicated by follicle number at ultrasound, high estradiol levels, or high number of oocytes obtained. In these cases, the consultant remain alert to make measure to prevent the OHSS. So by this, I am concluding these guidelines. Most of the time, most of the adjunct therapies and extra addition of letrozole, all these are not recommended. We should by this, I'm concluding these guidelines, and I'm open to discuss all these points if someone is asking any question. Thank you so much for patient listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarika, for such a wonderful
Yeah, that
presentation.
was
I would request
marathon.
Dr. Divya and Dr. Jyoti to kindly discuss.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ankita. And first of all, I would like to congratulate Dr. Sarika for that marathon talk. I think you should have some sort of water or something, because how much
Actually, my
deeply you
throat
have.
is drying now.
Yeah, so I would like to also thank Dr. Neeru for making me an expert for this, so that I could like literally sit and listen to you. So
Thank
that
you, ma'am.
was actually an amazing thought. I mean, the way you have presented it is absolutely good. And I'm sure we have many people still we have logged on. They must have benefited with it. So basically, I think it is all, they have taken it very deeply
Yes,
right
ma'am.
from the start. They have those 2 points and various subsets. And in those subsets, again, gone deeper into right from starting the pre-treatment to the pituitary suppression, the ovarian stimulation. And briefly, one thing the age part that was very important. They said that they took only
Ah,
AFC and AMH. And
yes, ma'am.
age they have taken only for
Only,
the
yes, ma'am.
pregnancy rate and not for
Pregnancy
the
prediction
ovarian
only.
response.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
So that I found
So that is
a
lacking, I
little
think.
difficult. Yeah. Because normally what we focus, I mean, the first thing when I see my prescription of the patient, I see the first
Age of the
thing,
patient.
age, and then I go on to my ultrasound, see the AFC, and the third thing is the AMH. Because still AMH, they say you can sort of in PCOS and all, it is not absolutely mandatory to understand the AMH values if you are okay with your AFC
Yes, ma'am.
ultrasound findings and all. So that was one very peculiar thing right in
Yeah.
the first
Right
that you have
from the start
taken.
of the
And
guideline, actually.
right from the start, when we are taking only AFC and AMH, they are taking. And anyhow, we are not taking FSH, inhibin B, E2s, progesterones, LH, and everything. We are not taking BMI also. I think we should consider, but they did not consider that also for the
Yeah, ma'am.
ovarian response. But age they have considered for the
For the
pregnancy rates that way.
predicting the pregnancy
Then
rates. Yeah.
pregnancies, right? Then the pre-treatment therapy, again, they have not recommended anything, neither progesterone, And COCs, definitely they have mentioned that washout period is there, because we were always like, we had stopped using COCs because we were thinking that, but still a minimum 5-day washout period is recommended for COC. And otherwise,
Yes.
progesterone, estradiol and everything, they are not recommending. Then again, the pituitary suppression on the ovarian stimulation protocols in high responders, again, a reduced dose. Normal responders, 150 to 225, okay. And low responders, again, they have said 150 to 225, and not going beyond 300 at all, because
Yes.
there is no point. With 300, they said that you can get more oocytes, but the birth rate will not be increased.
Yes.
So the pituitary suppression, again, whether we should, they have a strong recommendation of using both agonist agonist for the pituitary suppression if you are using only long protocols,
Only.
not ultra short, ultra short and all that.
Yes.
And any a strong recommendation to use antag over agonist for the pituitary suppression. Again, the dose for in these freeze-all, the flexible versus fixed, they are okay. You can use anything when you are similar birth rates, they are saying. And type of gonadotrophins, again, we have been all talking that there is no difference. Whichever you use, recommend recombinant, oblique, HMG, everything is fine. Then oral stimulation drugs with gonadotrophins, again, they are not recommended anywhere.
Yes.
Another very important thing, no adjuvants they have used. Neither metformin nor growth hormone, nor testosterone, nor DHEAs. So none of the adjuncts anywhere. Though I don't know whether sometimes we do tend to use growth hormones in our practice when we come across these poor responders or old age women. So, but they even metformin, they are not recommending as an adjunct in PCOS also.
Yes, ma'am.
When we thought that, okay, we use it to prevent hyperstimulation, they are not recommending. And random start, I think then the fertility preservation part also, they are very clear that you can use any phase of menstrual cycle to start your treatment. Luteal, random start, duostim, all are same. And here they are adding letrozole.
Yes, ma'am.
In your along with the gonadotrophin, so that otherwise in the other protocols, they are not adding oral ovulogens with the gonadotrophins. Now, oocyte hormonal assessment also very clear. They are saying that nothing matters. Neither there's need to do E2 levels or progesterone or LH, and ultrasound actually is good enough to understand what is happening, and they do not recommend doing a hormonal assessment along with in most of the cycles. Then also the oocyte trigger, the follicle size, normally we say, okay, 18, 20, 22.
Yes.
So they have given a good flexibility right from 16 to 22 for the final follicle maturation. And but with 22, it is giving a higher pregnancy rate and a higher, more oocyte yield. If we take it a little towards more than 20 mm. Levels, the progesterone levels on day of trigger, if we are doing a fresh embryo transfer, only then there is a need to do a progesterone. Otherwise, there is no point of doing a progesterone. The cycle cancellation, again, they say there is, if you see that there are only 1 to 3 oocytes, and you feel tempted to cancel that cycle, it is always one should make it a point to talk to the patient, because they said even 1 to 2 oocyte can give us a pregnancy depending on the oocyte quality. So that way it is one has to really talk to if canceling the cycle. points urinary HCG support also everything. So I think it is they have all these. Then the prevention of OHSS, again they say that freeze all you're doing only if you have a sturdy the protocols, you have the storage system is very good, then only you should you have to go for the freeze all. And also a strong recommendation where you are using a agonist protocol with a HCG trigger. So, and also a very good recommendation where you have to strongly add dopamine agonists to prevent OHSS. So these are the 2-3 points. All these 122 points you have very nicely. I think you've done a great job, and I really congratulate you. I don't see any questions in the chat box. Dr. Divya, I
Yeah.
think now it is she's going to give part comments.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Jyoti, and congratulations, Dr. Sarika. You have done a great job. Really, you have compiled everything in a very crisp manner, and you have tabulated beautifully. I must say you have made beautiful tables for all the evidences, though it was very vast, but you have covered them very well, and you have compared them in tabular form, which is very nice, very easy to understand. And Dr. Jyoti has already given a gist of it. And I think if we have any questions, we can take. Otherwise, we can wind off because
Yes, ma'am.
we're already past the time. Dr. Ankita, can you see any questions in the chat box?
No, ma'am. I think it's not there.
Divya, there's no question in the chat box. But thank you so much for such a detailed discussion, Dr. Sarika, Dr. Jyoti, and Dr. Divya. It's been a really nice discussion. Thank you so much for being so thorough.
Thank you, Dr. Ankita. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Dr.
ma'am.
Jyoti. And thank you, Dr. Neeru also. Thank you, Dr. Sarika.
Thank you so much,
Very
ma'am.
well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
I think
you.
Dr.
Thank you,
Sarika,
everyone.
you should share this PPT with all of us because
Yeah, sure,
आपने
ma'am.
इतना मेहनत किया है, so that we don't have to labor so much. So
Yes,
you
ma'am.
can make small little more. I mean, I think it would be it is up to you. But
Surely, ma'am, I'll share these PPT. Let me know on which platform I need to forward it. I'll
I
surely
think
forward it.
you can ask Dr. Neeru, Dr. Ankita,
Yeah,
and
ma'am.
all. So
Yeah, ma'am, sure.
I think it will benefit everybody
Yeah,
because
ma'am, of
going
course.
through such vast guidelines and then just going through these 80
Yes,
PPTs
when
Yeah,
will
ma'am.
save
when
a
I
lot of
opened,
time.
Yeah,
when
ma'am, I was
opened, I
working on
saw,
this for last 20 days.
yeah, I saw 185 pages. So I was like, what? So we are going to read so many pages. And then I just quickly went through, and very nicely you have compiled, Dr. Sarika. Very nice.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for
So
this.
Thank
she
you,
finished it
everyone.
in Dr. Divya, she finished it in 79 slides.
Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am.
And she finished in around maybe 50 minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's really nice.
Good.
Very well done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
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 you
you,
so
Dr.
much.
everybody. Thank
Divya,
you.
Dr.
Thank you.
Ankita.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
everybody.
so much, ma'am.
Thank you.